Hi, everyone. Thought I would take some time, since we missed a lecture yesterday, to go over a solution for Lab 9.6, which is the parsing of the input string based on the comma. One of the reasons why I felt this was a good one to do is because parsing comma-separated lines is not an unusual thing to do in C. It is a very common format for data. It's a very simple format for data. When you're writing to a file, it would be something you would use in a Arduino-based data logger that you would just write out lines of data and separate them by commas, and you can parse them later in Excel, or you would parse them and process them in your own program. It's a very common thing to do. The development environment in the zybook is not as complete as you would encounter in a totally implemented standards-based library. So I'm not even totally happy with the solution. I wanted to do some things another way, and zybooks wouldn't let me do it. So this represents a bit of a compromise, as I'm sure you make these all the time. What do you got to do to get the assignment done? But nonetheless, here is what I've done. So I'll get to it down here as I move through the source code. Used a function to remove spaces and carriage return. That's why I've named it remove junk and not just remove space. I have my input string. I have a constant character that is the comma, and that's used in the argument to one of the string search routines, string CHR. I have a pointer to where the comma is, and I have an index to where the comma is. So very, very lean, very simple variables here. In main, I have a infinite loop, while 1. This is going to run all the time. There's no condition to bomb out of it. As far as the while declaration itself, there is elsewhere. And every time through here, I'm going to initialize the string. I want to know that before I start, I don't have anything lurking out there. So I just do a quick run through it with a for loop to initialize all locations to 0. Prompt the user for the input string. Use fgetS to get that input string. And then I call remove junk. Now, when I'm processing strings like this, I like to have the string as consistent and as conformant to the format of the data that I want as possible. There is a concept out there called software robustness, where a program must behave as consistently as possible, and it must accept as much variation from input as possible. So with that in mind, I go through, I delete all the spaces. Now, sometimes you don't have the luxury of doing that, because if you've got an input that is supposed to have embedded spaces in it, then you can have some problems. So you might have to remove the extra spaces on a per substring basis. But in this particular problem's case, I'm just going through, get rid of all the strings, get rid of all the spaces and the new line on the end. So I do that first. Using another shortcut, I examine the first character in the string. I throw it through to lower to convert it to lowercase if it's upper, and then I only do one test. Is it a Q? Is it a lowercase q? If it is, that was a quit. And here is the break that breaks me out of the while loop. And this is the only place that that can happen, is right here when you enter a q on a line by itself. Presuming the user then does not do that, the next thing I do is I look in that string using string CHR for where the comma is. String CHR returns a pointer. Not an index, a pointer. So I examine that pointer to see if it's null. If it's null, that means there were no commas in the string, which means it's an invalid input. So at that point, I'm going to print error, no comma in string, and then I'm going to continue, which means my next iteration in the while loop. Presuming I've made it through this point, that means there was a comma in there. And so now I'm going to find out where that comma is as an index, which is simply the difference between where the comma pointer is pointing and the beginning of the string. So that difference gives me just a numeric number. I cast it as an integer and I put it into comma index. So if the comma is the 5th character in, and that's the location in memory being pointed to, comma pointer minus input string is going to be 5. So now I have an index. I know where it is. So I'm ready to print the data out. And rather than copy them to individual words, I just operated on the string itself since I know where the comma is. So I printf first word, and then for an index of 0 to, while I'm less than comma index, I'm going to print the characters in that string, boom, 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 till I get to where that character is. And then I stop. I'm going to do another printf, and I'm going to start with a carriage return at the beginning to give me the new line. I'm going to print second word, and then from comma index +1, which would be the next character after the comma, until I find a null terminator, which means I've hit the end of the string, I am going to print the rest of those characters, and that prints my second word, the word on the other side of the comma. Once I'm done with that, I print a new line and then repeat the loop. And as promised, here is the remove junk function down here at the bottom. Start with a count equal to 0. I am going to loop my way through the string. And if the current character I'm pointing to is a space or a new line, I am going to copy a character over it, kind of shifting the string over, as it were, writing on top of either the new line or the carriage return. And then once I get done with that, count is going to be pointing to basically the end of the string. I place a null at the end there, a 0, which marks the end of the string, and I'm done. So now I've eliminated any new lines and spaces embedded in the string. That's it. It's a pretty straightforward solution. I like them simple that way. Hopefully you do too. If there's any questions, you know how to get a hold of me.